Good afternoon and welcome. I am Katie Coldiron, the Digital Archivist and Project Manager at the Wilsonian Public Humanities Lab at Florida International University, and I am so proud to welcome you to Season 5 of our Coffee and Conversations Miami Book Fair. Today is episode 11, and we have such a timely and essential conversation awaiting us. We will learn about author Anjanette Delgado's new book, Home in Florida, Latinx Writers and Literature of Uprootedness. This series began at this point over a year and a half ago in the middle of the pandemic, when pivot was everyone's favorite word. We started Coffee and Conversations as a way of strengthening community ties and supporting the great work being done at our many community partners. We've explored topics from how the pandemic has affected museums and cultural institutions, the histories of anti-Blackness in museum spaces and beyond, and chatted with community partners. Please visit our YouTube channel to watch past episodes. Now, with this season, we are again working with the Miami Book Fair by highlighting a number of book fair authors to provide a kind of teaser for the fair itself. Today, we talk with Anjanette Delgado about her new book, Home in Florida, Latinx Writers and Literature of Uprootedness, moderated by Michael Grafals and Anne Castro. Briefly, our format is simple and lasts roughly 30 minutes. At the very end, we will take questions from the audience, so please submit a question at any time. You can find that button below on your screen. So without wasting any more of our precious time, allow me to introduce today's moderators and author. Our first moderator is Michael Grafals. Michael Grafals is an assistant teaching professor in the Department of English at Florida International University, where he regularly teaches courses on Caribbean, African, and U.S. Latinx literatures, and is the recipient of the 2020 FIU Top Scholar Award for his globally engaged and culturally responsive teaching. Our second moderator is Anne Castro. Dr. Anne Margaret Castro, who usually goes by Annie, is an assistant professor of postcolonial literature at Florida International University. After receiving her PhD at Vanderbilt University, Anne Margaret Castro was the Andrew W. Mellon Fellow in Literature of the Black Americas at the University of Oxford. Her monograph, The Sacred Act of Reading, Spirituality, Performance, and Power in Afro-Diasporic Literature, was published with University of Virginia's New World Press in January of 2020. She has had articles published in the Journal of West Indian Literature and the Afro-Hispanic Review, and will have an article published in Religion and Literature in 2023. Anne Margaret Castro received the Case Faculty Award for Teaching in 2019 and for Research in 2021. And then finally, our author, Anjanette Delgado. Anjanette is a Puerto Rican writer and journalist. She's the author of The Heartbreak Pill, The Clairvoyant of Calle Ocho, and the 2009 winner of the Latino International Book Award. Anjanette's work has appeared in numerous anthologies, as well as in the Kenyan Review, Pleiades, Vogue, the New York Times, the Hong Kong Review, NPR, and HBO, among others. A Breadloaf Conference alumni, she won an Emmy Award for feature writing in 1994, served as a judge for the Flannery O'Connor Short Fiction Award in 2015, and was a Peter Taylor Fellow in Fiction in 2016. Her short story, Lucky, was nominated for a 2020 Pushcart Prize. She holds an MFA in creative writing from Florida International University and lives in Miami, Florida. Anjanette's new book, Home in Florida, is featured at the Miami Book Fair this year. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so great. I'm excited.
Hi, Anjanette. Yeah, I heard today's a publication day, right?
Yeah, it's publication day. The book is out today. So exciting.
Hey, can you tell us more about the collection and what you hope readers might get from it?
Sure. So, I mean, the collection started out with an idea from my editor at University of Florida Press, Stephanie Hunter, and she just knew that there had to be Florida and there had to be Latinx. She wanted that point of view. And then as we were researching and thinking, I hadn't even taken on the project, I stumbled upon an interview that Reynaldo Arenas had given the New Yorker writer before his death in the very early 90s. And he was talking about his plan, right? What he wanted to do at the time. And what that thing was what he called a literature of uprootedness. Mm-hmm. It was his theory that we were all going to be involved in that concept, that uprootedness was going to be a fact of life for most humans, that it already was, but that we would become in the coming years even more conscious of the fact that we were moving beings, and that there would be circumstances in the world, political, economic, climate related, all kinds of circumstances that would have human beings moving around. And so once that got into my brain, there was no stopping it. And I started, and it was at the beginning of the pandemic, I should say. It was maybe May of 2020. I think we had just kind of said, oh, this is real. And so I was in that kind of mood where I said, you know, I have no money. This is a nonprofit press that I'm working with, but I'm going to call the most famous, the best, my favorite authors anywhere. I'm not going to hold back. I'm not going to have any shame. I'm just going to call or write and see what they say. And I sent out these emails, and every single one said yes. So the writers you see, those are the writers I wanted. Those are the writers that I thought could really bring the heartbreak, but also the urgency of understanding uprootedness into the pages that I was editing. And yeah, the book was born.
So was there anything that you felt like was revealed to you about Latinx literature today? In kind of once you had put all of these different items together and you were writing your introduction, what kind of stuff was revealed to you?
So a couple of things, right? While I was working on it, I realized a couple of things that were important to me. For example, of course, when you write a book, right, you try to read similar books that people have written before. You try to figure out what's the literature been composed of. And anthology after anthology showed me either translations of famous Latin writers who were still in their countries. They weren't living the immigrant experience in the US. Therefore, uprootedness didn't apply to them, but they were famous enough to be translated. Or they were really Latinx writers who had been here a while, spoke English, had been published, and so they were collected, right? Or people were told to read them. But what was missing was the just arrived, as I call them, the what have I done's, as I call them in my forward, right? Those people for whom uprootedness is still a very fresh concept. They are still mourning home. Home was left behind and no longer exists, but the new home isn't yet there for them. It doesn't yet know them, right? So imagine a plant that you pluck out, but you haven't yet planted it, really. It's in the garden, it's in the new garden, but it's still, in water or something, waiting for a good spot. That's kind of what uprootedness was to me. And so it was really important to me to capture and to include these writers who would otherwise, we would not know of them because they would be in no Latinx anthology, right? Because they're not famous enough, apparently, to be translated here. A publisher will not invest in translating them because they are not best-selling authors. But those are the authors that know what that side of the spectrum of belonging looks like because it's recent. And so to me, it was about putting together the entire spectrum. And so that's the way that the book is ordered. You see the first Patricia Engel's beautiful essay opens because there, the immigrant isn't talking. It's the people here talking about the people arriving and all the ways in which other people see us, right? And so then it progresses from there to the very bewildered Latinx writer who just arrived and says, what is this? And then very gradually until you get to the very end with Amina Gautier's piece, in which you can tell that some assimilation, right? Some rerouting has happened. So understanding that immigration or displacement as a process and not an event, that was crucial to me. And then once I'd finished, what I realized was I'm displaced. And I'd never thought of myself as displaced. I own my house. I'm privileged in so many ways. I have an education, I have access. to a public, I can express myself, and yet I'm not home. I'm not ever fully home, because, you know, we could have a change in our politics, for example, tomorrow, and all of a sudden half of every person out there could be asking for me to go back wherever I came from, even though I'm a citizen and I was born a citizen, right? So therefore, I'm never home. And that was a shocker to me, and to see that angst in everything I write. I thought I wrote about heartbreak and social justice. I never thought of myself as writing about displacement.
Yeah, there's an interesting idea in your introduction. You write about how the literature of desarraigo, right? La literatura de desarraigo, the word is different from uprootedness.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think desarraigo is beautiful. What a beautiful word, right? Desarraigo. It's like a bolero, just in one word. But it the connotation is broader, I think, more emotional. Whereas uprootedness is so much more of a practical word. And I think really reflects the reality on this end of the pond, right? It's just a more practical, more driven society with, you know, very specific goals of progress and opportunity in mind. And when you cross over, you change, your DNA changes in a way. And so, yeah, it's part of the reason why sometimes I don't watch Netflix. I can't stand the translation sometimes. Drives me bananas, right? To hear a former lawyer described as an abogado formal. It makes me want to just, you know, my brain explodes. And the same thing with desarraigo and uprootedness. It's just, there's no 100% translation, really. Just like we don't have 100% translation. Yeah.
That's interesting. Part of what you also kind of talked about was that, you know, desarraigo, you have this idea of what's left behind, which you mentioned a little bit ago. And I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of what you feel like this collection can particularly offer in terms of how we think about the relationship between looking back towards home and looking in the present, of course, at place, and looking towards the future, because narrative is always,
of course,
all of those at the same time, right? And we see that certainly in a lot of these texts. I'd love to hear a little bit about what you think this collection offers with that.
Yeah, I write something about that in a piece I published for LibHub just a few days ago. And it was, you know, I'm hoping that readers will realize that we are all displaced, that there are many types of displacement. Florida, for example, is a perfect example. There are people here who are displaced from another area of their lives. They're here because of divorce, climate change, a hurricane sent them over, a fire on the West Coast, right? Old age. Sometimes your own body kind of exiles you. And so I think that in the same way that if we thought of race in a different way, more in terms of degrees rather than in terms of definites, we would be able to be more inclusive. And the same thing for displacement. If we thought of this person not as from there, as opposed to from here, but just a person who is now here, who used to be there, just like I am now here, but I used to be somewhere else. I am not planted because I'm not a plant. I'm a human being, and therefore I am mobile. And so I think that the stigma of displacement would be reduced if we could broaden our concepts of it to think in that way, right? And I make that analogy of race because, again, black and white, there's just all these shades, right? And then people go through their entire lives trying to figure out if they're black or white because, you know, we're just a mix of everything. And the same goes for displacement. So in the book, I find it hard to believe that there could be a human being who wouldn't identify with at least one of those experiences. And they're all so different, right? Some of them are the typical displacement story that we hear in the news, and others are just something else altogether that we never imagined. And so it would open the minds, but hopefully it would also open the hearts, create a broader understanding of immigration, displacement, uprootedness. That's my hope, at least.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can think about how, in just a few selections, we go from, the way an author feels displaced by the demands of his own creative work, right, to, they're all authors, but, another author, being displaced by his own mental health experiences, right, and having been displaced by anti-gay practices in Cuba. I mean, so there are all of these, I would agree with you. I think we get to move between so many human experiences of displacement.
Yeah, and so if what you just said, if you think back to what I was saying at the beginning about that spectrum of belonging, if you will, right? With one end being you just arrived, there's no way you belong, and then there's that path, right, towards that one, maybe without even intending it at some point, let's say post 9/11, right? You woke up and all of a sudden you said, oh my God, I love this country. I love this. I didn't know it. I belong here. I've become part. This has become my home. And that was a surprise, I think, for many Latinos 20 some years ago now. But also, so that's one spectrum, right? And then there's the spectrum that we were just talking about with displacement, right? All the different ways, all the different experiences. And then hopefully as readers, just as readers, I would hope that I tried, along with my contributors and their efforts, to arrange it in such a way that a reader would be reconnected with the reason that they read, which is to feel things. Because I think that we get also into, you write to inform, to entertain, to convince, right? There's all these reasons, but as readers, all I want is to feel something. And as a writer, all I want to do when I write, first and foremost, is to make you, the reader, feel something, feel human, and feel more connected and more alive. And then if you understand something through that, and if you learn it, and if you become, if you laugh, whatever else comes it's a plus. But if you felt, then you're alive, and I've done my job, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
I was wondering about the title "Home in Florida." Do you discover something unique about the Floridian experience in terms of Latinx or uprootedness?
Absolutely.
I love how you write about the angst of being in Florida.
Yes. Well, and I think even more lately because of the political climate, right? Florida has become this place. I mean, the other day I was watching late night TV, which I shouldn't. And it was crazy to me that the person, the host, just said Florida. He didn't have to say anything. There was no joke. He had no joke. He just said Florida, and the audience roared. And I said, wow, that's where we are, right? And I concede, not entirely without reason, because when you have a place, where there's a lot of heat and you're close to the coast and a lot of people pass by, the DNA of the place changes and broadens, whether you want to or not. And that's part of the tension, right? So the tension in Florida has been for many years about change, right? As I mentioned, it's the here and the there, it's the them and the us, it's the before and now and the future. There's all these tensions constantly, and it makes us weird, quite frankly. It just makes, I could find in 5 minutes some 200 really, really weird headlines, and they would be true about Florida, right? And so it was weird to me how this place that is so weird, right? The vein of the country's existence also felt to so many people like, that could be home. I'm leaving this horrible place. The gangs are after me. I'm about to get murdered. Communism, has decimated my family, whatever. Where would I go to make home? Florida seems like a great peaceful place. Like, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be the place where so many people go next to find peace and to find home. And yet it is. It is. And, it isn't the least racist place in the world. It isn't the most economically mobile. It's not like, you know, we have more jobs here than anybody else. What makes this the place where so many people from so many different countries, not just Latinos, come and say, I think I'll stay here. And so that's part of what we're exploring, right? How did my 35 contributors, how did they realize they were home? What things played into it? And it has to do with that weirdness. It has to do with that mobility. It has to do with that tension that we have. And it's an asset. But those of us who live here in Florida, who've lived here for a minute, we don't see it as an asset. We think we're just bad, and we have a bad notion of ourselves, right? We're just weird and crazy. And of course, Florida people are late and they're loud and all of that, rather than saying, no, we're welcoming. People want to live here. We're beautiful. We understand. There's a really great mix. When you live here, you feel alive. We don't say those things about ourselves. And that was part of it for me.
So I'm going to ask, we don't have a ton of time, so I'm asking a slightly personal question. You know, did you have any, I know you had kind of a realization around, realizing, you know, displacement and uprootedness in your own life. Did you have any realizations around home? And we're both in Miami, obviously in Florida, you know, so as specific as, of course, you've written, you know, texts based in Calle Ocho and everything. So so I just love to hear, like, if you had any of your own revelations around home and belonging, as you were doing this project.
Absolutely. I definitely changed in the process of editing this book. And when I left Puerto Rico, I left because there was a gender violence wave so tough that it was messing with my sanity. I worked as a journalist back then, and it was really affecting my sanity. And so I left with my 2 little girls and came here, right? But when I came here, I severed a lot of my ties. I was escaping, and because I was escaping, everything in the new place was good and everything in the old place was bad. And so forever and ever, there was this tension within me, this guilt, this incompleteness. And I think recently, as I've gotten stronger and as I've begun to write more nonfiction, whereas I before just concentrated on fiction, but as I've had to dig inside, right, I've realized that in order to be complete and be at home here in Florida, I need to reclaim Puerto Rico. I need to return. I need to understand. I need to separate. And I think this is for all of us. We need to separate the places we left from our parents and our families and our problems at the time, because that is one very limited context. And immigrants, us all, even though I'm a citizen, I'm an immigrant, we tend to judge the entire country by whatever happened to us, right? And uncle beat us up. We left because our country is violent, not our uncle is violent, right? And it becomes this whole big thing that we never want to return to. And I submit to you and to people listening that you will have a hole until you go back mentally, physically, emotionally, however you want, to that place you left, and you make friends with yourself for leaving and for them for whatever they did that made you leave. And then you'll be just fuller, happier. And if you're a writer, you'll write more. Right. So I learned that. I hope it's useful.
I think I already am feeling things. I think it's incredibly useful. And I do think that actually speaks to a lot of what we see in Latinx literature, right? In your foreword, you talked about how, you know, right, Latino, Latinx, it is by definition not in the homeland, right? You know, the author's by definition. And I think this tension that you're speaking of the need to have a different narrative of the past, of the homeland, in order to have a different sense of narrative of home in the present place, wherever that may be. I think that really seems to speak a lot to, I think, the larger world of Latinx literature. So I would suggest Florida can say a lot about, right, the US, about Latinx literature in general. And probably by extension, what you're also arguing, and Arena's arguing, is that, like, all humans, right? All
Yeah.
people's experience.
Yeah, absolutely. No matter where you came from, you are displaced from somewhere,
Yeah.
from something, from someone.
Yeah.
And I think it applies. It took me 30 years to get there. So hopefully somebody will take that and run with it. And, you know, it won't take them an entire life to get to the single realization that would have made them better, you know, and happier their whole life. But there you go. That's how it is.
Yeah. Any plans after this collection? Any?
Oh my God, yes. I finished writing a novel. And then after I written the whole thing in Spanish, I decided that that wasn't the voice. So I translated into English and I'm now revising. And I think that the next project will be set in Puerto Rico. I think that that's one of the things that I need to do, is to set a project in Puerto Rico, to have a character return. I've been thinking about a detective, a female detective, because there aren't any in our literature, unfortunately, but not surprisingly. And I feel like detectives have to do with identity. They're the perfect characters for thinking about those things. And because I left because of gender violence, I would want this detective to be all about gender violence, to have to solve these crimes and come to terms with things. It's a way of pushing myself to investigate me and my motives and to try to get at some answers sometime soon in this life, hopefully.
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this conversation, and thank you so much for all the work you did putting together, you know, the collection. I want us to have more and more and more, you know, collections of like.
Can I just say something really quick? I just want to do a shout out. I haven't mentioned the writers in this. I just want to let people know. I mean, we have work from Richard Blanco, have work from Yakira Diaz, who was just recently on the cover of Time magazine with her work. Patricia Engel, who is a fantastic writer. Amina Gautier, Janine Capo-Cruzet contributed, Ana Menendez contributed a beautiful piece, Caridad Moro. There's just so many. I mean, there's 35, I won't mention them all, but I do think that it has what I would like to see in an anthology, which is a lot to like, and not just one or two, right, great pieces, but it's just evenly great. And it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with these amazing authors. Achi Ovejas contributes to it. And I just want to shout out to them and thank them for trusting me with their work. Some of them didn't know me from Adam. I was just this crazy lady who was calling them during a pandemic to ask them to write something original for me with a deadline, by the way, on a particular topic, by the way. And they all said yes. And I'm so, so grateful for that to them. This is their book, really.
I love that. Thank you all so much for this conversation. Seriously, like when Lisa Pally from the Miami Book Fair asked us to do this, and this is our last week, so I've been particularly reflective. You know, I was so excited to do it, and it's been such a treat hearing from all the authors, but it's really genuinely made me think about me and my identity in a different way. You know, hearing this interview and you know, reading your book. I also did an interview. I interviewed myself, an author named Albert Samaha, a few weeks ago, with a book called Concepcion, which is incredible. Also Miami Book Fair book, of course. He's actually going to be here also for a few talks. And we were talking all about colonization and the roots of colonization and reckoning with that as an immigrant. And I feel like your book has made me feel a lot of the same feelings, and like what you just said about revisiting where you came from and where you left, and how that's really going to help you heal and understand yourself better as a human. You know, I came here from Peru when I was 2 years old, and I've been back a few times, but I haven't been back in the sense of like, let me go back and explore my cultural roots, you know, or like explore, you know, this place where I came from. You know, I haven't been back in that sense. And I think that your book really made me think about that. And I love that. And
I'm so happy that my job is done, you know.
Well, everyone, thank you so much. Anjanette, a couple notes to leave off on. So Thank you so much for joining us and participating in this chat today. Make sure to visit us and to follow us online, the WPHL, on Facebook and Instagram at FIUWPHL, and follow the Miami Book Fair at Miami Book Fair. And you can follow them online as well. Find their website at miamibookfair.com or miamibookfaironline.com if you want to see some of their online events coming up. The 38th annual Miami Book Fair is happening right now. It already started. It's in full swing, happening from November 14th to the 21st. So you have a lot of time, especially this weekend. The street fair is happening. So there's a lot of really fun events happening this weekend that I'll touch upon. But make sure to check out their website, miamibookfair.com, and see all of the awesome author talks and events happening up until next week. It's happening mainly at the Miami-Dade College Wolfson campus in downtown Miami. But make sure to RSVP for all these events. Anjanette is just one of the many authors from around the world participating in the Miami Book Fair 2021, the nation's largest gathering of writers and readers of all ages. They're also looking forward to sharing their work, thoughts, and new ideas with everyone in person and online this year. So please visit Miami Book Fair for more information and follow Miami Book Fair at Miami Book Fair on social media. One last thing I do want to mention before we wrap up is that Anjanette is going to be having a author talk happening on Saturday, November 20th at 6 p.m. Okay.
6 p.m.
6 p.m. Exactly. You can find all of this information at the Miami Book Fair event calendar. Okay. So make sure to go grab your ticket, join us if you want to continue this amazing conversation about home in Florida, and what this all means and what this means for your identity. So once again, thank you all so much. And the last thing I'll say is that this Thursday, we have our last Coffee and Conversations chat for season 5 with Teresa K. Miller, author Teresa K. Miller, author of the new book, Borderline Fortune, moderated by Whitney Bauman. So we're super excited, feel so grateful to be a part of this. And thank you so much again, Anjanette. Whenever I'm around Bird Bowl, I'll make sure to yell to make sure that.
Shout out.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much to Michael and Ann. You all are the best.
Thank you. Yes, they were.
Great opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks for the great questions. Bye-bye.